We're eating gas station tacos in Texas. You just showed up and your flight was delayed, and you don't even have any fresh panties, right? All your luggage was lost. So I thought I would make your day better by starting off with a gas station taco from Rudy's.
Can't beat it.
But why don't you explain to people who are listening who you are? Introduce yourself.
Hey, I'm Cathal Quinn. I'm the managing director, CEO of a company called Moy Materials. I'm from Dublin, Ireland. And I'm here today to do the pod with Kirk, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Listen, I'm flattered and honored to have you here. I got to meet you for the first time at DCAC. Is that where we met?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's the genesis of this whole thing. You're the first guy from across the pond that we've had.
Cool.
So I'm hoping that this helps open up that aperture for them to where they understand that they're a part of this U.S. data center market as well. I think a lot of the things, I believe that there's a lot of things that begin here and end up radiating throughout the other parts of the APJ, EMEA, or South America. And I hope that we could connect, more and create a better bridge between those other markets in America. And you're a great example of that, right? And what you do in this industry is very important to this industry. I was driving here with my CRO, and he's like, talk to me about the roofs in this industry. I'm like, yeah, that's where all the penetrations and roofs are a big factor for us. He's like, how come we're not just solaring up all the roofs? I'm like, well, there's a lot of reasons why we're just not doing lots of things to the roofs. And I'm sure that we'll get into that.
Yeah.
But the genesis was, I want to understand, what drove you to come to DCAC. And we're here talking because we're going to do a DCAC in the UK, whether it's in Dublin or London is to be determined. But we want to take what we're doing here and bring it over there. So I want to understand who you are, where you started, how you got in this industry, how you became the managing director, which an MD over in the UK is a lot different than what we talk about.
Yeah, it's a CEO. I mean, it's the same role. Depending on where you are, I say CEO if I'm in the US, and I say MD or managing director when I'm in Europe. So
it's exactly right. A lot of people don't understand the lexicon, but there's a big difference in those two things. And but you got into this game. Like, tell us a little bit about yourself. You spent some time in prison. I could tell by the tattoos, right? So you're a runner, obviously. But walk us through the horn. And look, I know I'm asking you to talk when you're probably also starving. But
I'm looking forward to a bit of the taco. But I'll get into it in a minute. The first few bites were good. So thanks. And look, a huge thanks for having me here. I think to go back to the first bit you even said, I've always believed, this industry is, it's a US industry, right? I'm not knocking the European market, the EMEA market, the APAC markets by saying that, but, the funds generally start and end here, right? So our clients, all your clients, when you're here in the US with Overwatch, are the same clients as we're working with across the whole of EMEA.
For sure.
So I've kind of, I'll get back to that in a minute. How I
Who
first
introduced
saw
us? Was it LD?
LD, yeah. LD, so basically I was chatting to LD, I've been talking to him for a few years on a number of things, and we were just chatting about events, and, I think we might have been in Monaco at an event or one of the events chatting about or maybe it was a PTC last year, and I was saying, look, what am I missing? What else do I need to get to? And he said, look, you got to get to DCAC.
Oh, cool.
He said, you got to experience the event. He knows the type of character I am. I'm kind of heart and sleeve. Well, whatever way you want to talk it, and fairly, my way of running a business, my way of doing business is all about relationships. It's all about the humanistic side of it. We talk all the time about, like, what are we in? Like, look at AI. We're looking at machines, right? Everything is machine. Everything is, compute. But really, without the humans, which are the first machine, in my opinion, nothing else works, right? Unfortunately, maybe AI will have something to say about that in years to come. But right now, and I'm 42 years of age, and the 20 years I've been in business, it's humans. So it's acknowledging that. And for me, built up a strong rapport with LD over the last few years, and he just said, you got to meet Kirk, you got to meet David Isaac, and you got to get in front of these guys and go and experience their event in Austin, which I did. And
he's been obviously, my relationship with Laramie goes back to the earliest days of our careers, and I credit those people that have been in my circle from the beginning as a part of the genesis to any success I have. Laramie's obviously one of those guys, just a good dude, right? I think that he's well known and a very well respected man in this industry. But he also he builds to the extreme. He lives to the extreme,
Absolutely.
Which is a reason why we could get along so well. I mean, he was there with me day one on DCAC, I mean, he's spoken on stage a few times, and him and JT were the first two guys to launch this podcast with me. And I think that shirt you're probably wearing was a shirt that I bought from his brand, which is Giddy Up.
Giddy Up, yeah.
Right. So we'd buy T-shirts from him every year, and then make our conference T-shirts out of them. It's just, this industry is really big on supporting each other.
Absolutely.
It's a small industry, even globally, right?
Yeah.
We know some of the same people over the other side of the pond than you do, and it's a smaller world than you may think. The industry's smaller than you may think. You being here today is a representation of how much smaller this industry is. For those that don't know, you got on a plane from Dublin yesterday, connected in London, had your bags lost somewhere in London probably, landed here, 2 a.m?
I got to my hotel about 2 a.m.
Yep. And then here we are today talking about data centers, right? And we're doing that too because you're helping us. We're going to put together a DCAC Live event, which only happens once a year right now in Austin, Texas. This year, we're adding a second event for the first time ever. And it's not going to be in the United States. It's going to be in the UK. And we're looking at options in London and Dublin right now. And you're going to help us, right? You're going to help us kind of map out the ecosystem over there. And you saw what we do here in the States. And we're trying to apply an element of that over there. There's DCDs over there already, and AFCOMs and 724s. Those conferences are great, absolutely necessary. We're not in any opposition to those conferences. We are in agreement with them. We're just different than those conferences. Ours is solely focused on the human experience. I mean, don't get me wrong. We all love talking about the data centers, but we're in the fifth industrial revolution right now, and that is really a focus on how we humans are establishing a healthier, more harmonious or symbiotic relationship with the machines and the technology in our lives. And I think a lot of that is us getting healthier individually as well. Everybody seems to be on a journey of their own. You're sitting here talking about your running, but tell us where you started from, right? So your name, obviously very Irish, right? So you're from where? Tell us how you started.
Yeah, so look, my name's Cathal. It's Gaelic. It's Gaelic for Charles. It can be pronounced, I suppose, Cathal or Cathal. Or when you come to the US or even the UK, Kyle, K-hole. Germans call me K-hole. Americans a lot of the time call me
K-hole?
Yeah, K-hole. I've never been in one, but I believe it's a miserable place. Americans a lot of the time Kyle. English people will call me Carl.
Carl?
It's just a difficult, it's a silent T, so it's the amount of times I've had to, on the phone, people say.
So when guys like me call you, "What's up, Cathal?" You're like, "What's up?"
Yeah, it doesn't bother me.
I don't get, I get cross either.
I don't get carried away about it at all. I mean, the amount of years I've had to go, people say, "What's your name?" And I'll say it, and I'll say Carl, and it's a Carl, and I say Carl, they say Carl, and I go, okay. Or the amount of times I've had to go Charlie Alpha, Tommy Henry Alpha Lima, so they get the spelling right. So that's more for emails, So the name comes, it's a Gaelic name. It's the Gaelic for Charles or Carlos if you're coming from a Spanish speaking background.
Charles and Carlos, huh? I had no idea. I'm going to call you Carlos for now.
Yeah, I don't know.
That Irish Carlos.
A friend of ours in the industry calls me Carlos sometimes, but she always slags me and says, "Look, you don't have the colour for it, but I'm going to call you it anyway." So maybe another extra few weeks in Hawaii, and I would have been tan enough for it. But so the name comes from there. It's I was originally named after a brother of my grandfather who was Cathal Britain. His claim to fame was he was the youngest ever station master of Donegal Town train station in Ireland. So the family ran the train station and he was the youngest ever station master. So it was named after him. And that's where the name comes from. Where I come from, a couple of little treks in the middle, but born and reared in Dublin, Ireland. Originally had a spell of about 7 or 8 years in the Midlands of Ireland in the country in County Westmeath, but back in Dublin properly since I was about 9 years of age. Lived in a small town, actually very, very close to, every time I come to this country, people say to me, "Hey, what do you think of Conor McGregor?" So where I grew up is quite close to where he's from.
Oh, no kidding.
Not too far away. Don't know the man, but
held in reverence over there?
Sorry?
Is he held in reverence over there?
Yeah, he's held high. I think like any sports star, you'll have your audiences, your people that are well behind you, and some that aren't. You know, I don't know if you know of a sports star called Roy Keane. He's one of our most famous ever soccer players. Same as that. You know, he was brilliant.
Polarizing.
Yeah, but you know, some people will be absolutely behind him, and as they become more famous and more vocal, then some people will maybe go against him. But you can't stand in the way of what Conor McGregor has done in relation to you know, the rags to riches story.
He's inspired a lot of people.
He's a grafting, hard-working human who has worn his heart on his sleeve. Yeah, I think, you know, if you look at, you know, that kind of MMA world, it reminds me, not quite as much, but a little bit of WWF when we were kids. You know, there is a narrative, there is a storyline, but it's also a lot more real.
He's like the modern day Ric Flair.
Yeah,
the nature boy.
I can actually see him throwing everything up in the air and just shouting woo.
He is disruptive. He's provocative, and I think that he obviously knows that he was doing those things to get attention, and it worked.
Absolutely,
it worked. He did a lot for the sport, and he got a lot of attention in it.
Did a lot for the sport. Did a lot for Ireland.
I would say he was the pride of Ireland for a long time.
Absolutely, and you know. And I talk quite often when I get into conversation about him, actually, I talk quite often about another character in Ireland that was doing as much for the country as far as I'm concerned in sport, and it was a female boxer called Katie Taylor. And Conor actually, you know, supports her as well. I know he's done some work around her, but she was our first ever professional boxer, and she was an Olympian. She won the Olympic gold at one stage, and then she went pro a number of years ago, and she pretty much has every belt now globally that she can have in her weight divisions and up and down. So
I've always viewed like the Irish are just like Texans in terms of like, you're not going to find many people in the United States more proud of their state.
Yeah.
I mean, the Buckeyes, like Ohio people are big, and New Yorkers or some stuff, but like Texans are very, very proud of their state. I always felt like the people from Ireland are just as protective and guarded and proud of their state.
We are so proud of our country and our state, and as you call it. And it's quite interesting when one of the most beautiful things about doing work with US clients is they see Europe like they see the US, and you have pockets which are like states. Now that we're on that, the first thing I'm going to have to correct you on, we talk about DCAC live in Europe. You say we'll do it in the UK. There's a lot of Irish people, if they're watching this, they're going, Dublin's not in the fucking UK, man.
I know. I'm going to piss off everyone because I was there during the Brexit vote. I'm still confused, right? So,
me too. Don't worry about it. But yeah, so I mean, look, Ireland is, you know, the Republic of Ireland. Dublin's in Ireland. It's in Europe. We have, you know, we're an hour away from the UK, you know, and actually we're not even, you know, on a plane. We're, you know,
45 minutes,
35 to an hour, depending on what part you're going. And Northern Ireland, which is attached to us, is still in the UK. You know, I can be in Northern Ireland in about 55 minutes from my house, you know.
Yeah.
And I'm in a different country, you know.
Sure.
So it's, but yeah, we're so proud. And myself and LD have had this conversation as well. Like, you know, and he said, if you ever come to America, because that's the first time I met him, I'd never been in Texas. And he's like, well, then you haven't been in America, you know.
Him, of course.
So, So, and I feel that too. I think that the pride in the Texans is very similar to that of the Irish.
100%.
We are, you know, we have a lot of history. We have a lot more history than an awful lot of countries have come through an awful lot of stuff. And, you know, most of us are, well, I believe all of us are extremely proud of our nation. And, you know, and look, it's that piece as well. You talked about it there. I'll talk all the time about the data center. You know, commercially, it's a monster, right? You know, if you count it in dollars, you count it in megawatts globally, it's billions, it's, you know, millions and millions of megawatts, etc. It's huge.
It'll reach the mainstream as an industry this year.
Yeah.
The tipping point will happen this year.
It's really happening. You can see it, you know, but, you know, the ecosystem is tiny, you know. So yeah, like you mentioned, you know, there's a lot of contacts you'll have in Europe that I'll know, and there's guys and girls I know in the US that you'll know. And because at the end of the day, it's, as I said, it's, you know, it's a global business, but a lot of the funds, a lot of the capital, a lot of the decisions end up happening or starting at least here in the United States. So no, and look, the Irish, we've shown, I think, over hundreds of years, we're not scared to travel. We're not scared to work. We've had to work hard. We had to work hard for our independence. We've had to work hard for everything we get and do. Like most humans, right? We're not saying, as you say, we don't say we have a monopoly on that. But coming from a small nation, you know, you work hard, you know.
For being such an older, more established nation, you sure do still carry a shit ton of grit on that shoulder. Like when I was in Dublin last time, the pride was like I got my ass kicked from I didn't know the rules when you drink Guinness, which was you have to take your first sip of Guinness to where you hit the foam level just above the heart before the letters.
Yeah.
And if you don't do it perfectly, then that whole glass doesn't count.
Hey, you're on to your next first one.
I was coming back from Dublin, and JT, who's never been there too, was like, hey, what's it like? And he and I have had a lot of fun in a lot of places in this country. And I said, it's not a place for people like him and I. I'm like, because I got done partying. I was like, I don't know if I'm ever going to come back to Dublin. So I literally was done until the hire car took us to the airport to get through, TSA and customs.
Yeah. Because
you get on the customs side on that side before you fly over. And then I slept the entire way here, knowing like I could go all night because I'll just sleep the entire flight back. Right. But I was taken deep into the paint by the proud people of Dublin who wanted to remember that they not only, were this massive force to be reckoned with in Europe, that a lot of the backbone of the United States was built off their backs, right? And like you said, I think that no one would ever argue that the Irish are afraid to work and put out and perform. But you grew up in this really amazing culture and then somehow ended up into data centers. So take us through, like, you're a runner now? Were you a runner then? It sounds like you were. Like, how did you stumble into the trades, or how did you stumble into this profession, and how did that profession transcend into this industry?
Yeah, it's kind of, it's a funny one, isn't it? If I go back even further, I mean, growing up, I was into sport,
What kind of sport, like soccer or football?
Yeah, no, I couldn't kick snow off a roof. I have two left feet when it comes to a ball on the ground. Basketball was my first sport. It was my first love. I tell my wife that all the time. It was my absolute first love. Actually, one of the first conversations I had with LD, go back to him again, was, sick talking about data centers. What will we talk about? And
he's talking about basketball.
He said, we'll talk about basketball. And I was like,
that's the worst.
Bring it on.
Yeah. He's definitely not going to talk about his Cowboys.
No.
That's why.
and he was talking about his boys and, what they were doing and stuff like that. And I was talking about, me playing and my boy, James, who was 8 years of age, and he plays. And I think he was 5 or so at the time. And he was playing. So we were showing videos of, obviously my boy wasn't dunking like Cooper was at the time, but
he's a monster.
Yeah, great to watch, and I've seen him play. But yeah, so I grew up playing basketball, became infatuated with the game, in turn became infatuated with the United States of America, watching both, predominantly NBA. It was the Jordan era.
Sure.
I suppose not being 6'6" and being a white skinny Irish guy, I modelled my game a bit more on Steve Kirk.
But you're tall. You're 6'1". What are you?
6'1", yeah. But like 6'1",
no, that's
6'1" in Ireland, in day-to-day life is tall.
Yeah.
Until I decided to move to London, and I was having my going away drinks in a pub in Dublin, and some of my other normal sized mates from 5'6" to 6 foot came, and they looked at all these monsters that were beside me, and they were my buddies from my basketball team, because I was the second smallest guy on my basketball team.
Gotcha.
There was a guy 5'11", there was me 6'1", and then the rest were 6'3" to 6'11". So I grew up playing basketball. It was life for me. Probably grew up a bit, didn't really, unless I was on a basketball court or trying to be cool with other people that I didn't fit in with, I probably didn't know where I fitted in a lot of the time. I also ran. That was my other sport. We were talking about that earlier. I ran, always hated track. We talked about monotony. It was so just bland and boring. And I feel like if I look back now at 42 years of age, I perform better in the unknown. I just always have. I don't know why. Call it makeup, call it genes, whatever it is. I seem to perform better in situations where I don't know what's coming next, but neither do my competition. So cross-country running, I just loved it. I absolutely loved it. It was great. It was good for basketball as well. So it was a different type of fitness, but it was very good for great cardio, great core work. Again, just loved, the winter, the muck, the rough, the tumble, so loved those sports. But basketball was number one. And as I got to about 16 years of age and started, realizing that I was, I had I had a bit of talent, but I was a really hard grafter and I was addicted to the sport. It was my first addiction. I absolutely love that sport, basketball, and I would sleep and dream it. I've got a buddy of mine who's in the data center sector now as well, actually. You know, we know each other since I was 9, since he was 11 years of age. And on Christmas Day every year, you know, you get your new clothes, put your new Jordans on, put your Bulls tracksuit or whatever it is you got, or Notre Dame gear, and we'd meet up at his house and we'd walk around to the same basketball court, an indoor basketball court, expecting or hoping that they decided this Christmas to open. They never opened. Why would they open? Of course they wouldn't. It's Christmas Day. It's a community centre. Sure. But we just looked at the doors thinking, damn, maybe we wish we could go in. You know, it was probably too cold to play on outdoor courts. I have broken wrists trying to jump on wet courts and falling on my ass. And,
oh, for real?
Yeah. So yeah, but no. So yeah, going back to that, I suppose childhood, and you're asking me about data centers, and career, but it started with sport. You know, I became a team player very, very early, and realized that there was definitely people a hell of a lot more talented than me on every team pretty much I played on. You know, when I was really young and I played my local team, yeah, maybe I was probably the best, but I kept moving. I kept saying, well, I want to go to an environment where there's better players, where there's better people, stronger players in that sport, and kept pushing myself in that, and was all very, very aware, I suppose, you know, in a kind of a Dennis Rodman kind of way. I knew what I could bring. I knew I'd work my ass off. I didn't have to be the one scoring 30, 40 points a game.
Didn't paint your hair like that?
No, I ran out of hair quite quickly. So, but yeah, no, but that kind of way, you know, it was, just work hard. If you enjoy something, just get stuck in, work really hard at it and enjoy it, you know?
Let me give you some air cover so you can eat your taco, because I know you've had a long night, right? Get your coffee in you. Cool. So I'll talk for a second so you can consume, you know, and I'll just talk about the broad strokes between, you know, your two passions of love, which are the genesis. I think all men are able to do anything as long as they continue to stay dangerous. And to stay dangerous, you have to maintain your fitness. Keep eating, because I'm going to stop talking a little bit. My thing is, I think that we know, you know, we can't lie to ourselves. So when we're healthy and fit, we know that confidence radiates and we feel like we could conquer everything. When we're not, then we really sabotage ourselves as men in a horrible way. And when you do sports, it's a broad stroke you paint with. But I come from, you know, I started off in martial arts as a kid, and then I got into wrestling, and I really loved that. I didn't ever do well in a team sport. Wrestling's an individual sport. You're on a team. And then I found my passion when I had cancer. Coming out of cancer, I got really into ultra endurance racing, Spartans, Tough Mudders, triathlons, things of that nature. And what I learned was, the reason why there's a big difference between like basketball and cross country, it's beautiful to do both, but there's advantages and disadvantages from both types of sports. As a team sport, what you said to me was you learned how to be on a team, you learned how to be a team player. And it's important to be on a team and learn how to be a team player. That's why I think every parent should put their kids in some form or fashion of competitive sports. What you get on a team is the understanding of how to contribute to the success of something greater than yourself. That's what you learn in the military. Yeah. I think that the only downside for me, or the unintended consequences of team sports, in my opinion, are that it's subjective sometimes, where you know, the coach will decide who gets to be the starter that day, or you know, you have a lot of influence over who gets to be on that team as a starter based on contributions or support that have happened to a program. As an example, there's politics and diplomacy that goes into everything. Whereas in track and field, right, or wrestling or cross country, your time determines who's first. Like, and I gravitated more towards them. I felt like team sports are great for helping you understand how to acclimate into a team, but it also helps you discover how some people are able to hide behind the dead bodies on that team and just not be the worst one. Whereas there's 100% transparency in an individual sport and a greater deal of accountability, in my opinion, to where if you don't want favoritism to play a role in your ability to be on the podium, then just perform. Just go out and out hustle, out run, out swim, out whatever someone else, and then your statistics will put you in the position of being first, second, or third place, and you don't have to worry about the opinion of someone else liking you or not. That's, I mean, going back to your Irish roots and your background, look at Conor McGregor is a great example of, if it was a popularity contest, he may not have ever been on the first place podium. But if he had to be measured and weighed on his ability to perform on an output level, he didn't have to require a team for that. He was able to do that on his own, and that's what allowed him to succeed. So you've played both sports, right? And I'm just trying to give you a little bit of time because I want you to eat.
No, I'm done. I've eaten. It's gone.
But my thing is there's a difference. And for the people that are listening, like, not all sports are the same. Team sports are great. They offer you this. This is what parts they put you into, which is the popularity contest of team sports and the favoritism by coaches or things like that are no different than what we have to deal with in a work environment. So it does teach you those things. But if you play individual sports, it teaches you that it's almost like a salesman's mentality where, how many times have you heard salespeople say, hey, winning deals solves all problems. And as an individual contributor to sports, winning silences a lot of people, right? So I just said that to kind of put a construct around the differences between those two, so that when you talk about how those both sports affected you, it gave you time to eat a taco.
That's perfect. Thank you. I enjoyed the taco. It was perfect. Yeah, I think for me, the individual sport gives you that resilience within yourself.
Yeah,
that strength, that grit. And we were talking a few minutes about cross-country running, the amount of times I've been at the bottom of a hill and, you're 15 years of age and you're 5K into a 6 or 7K run in a race, and, you don't know what's around the corner. You don't have a clue, but you dig deep, and only you can do that. You can't pass that ball to someone else and hope they make it out.
No one's coming for you.
No one's covering. In basketball, you take a charge, then someone else, we get the ball again, someone else can do the next hard bit, but you've done your bit, right? And so I absolutely love individual sports. I always battle with myself, not battle, but I think about both, and especially in children. I mean, I've got two kids, an 8-year-old boy, James, and an 11-year-old girl, Mia, and they both play sports. They
play hoops?
My boy does, James does, yeah, he plays. He's been playing since he was 4 or 5. He loves it. But they both are involved in individual sports as well. Mia has gravitated a bit more towards individual sports. She's a gymnast and judo, and my son James fights judo as well, and they do athletics and things like, they're not competing, but they do swimming just for exercise and activity and just knowing how to swim. But yeah, for me, I think a lot of my grit definitely came from the athletic side of it, from the running, from cross-country running especially. I said to you earlier, for me, I love the unknown. I don't know what it is. It excites me. When I ran track, it bored me. I was crap. I was terrible at track. I could run the same distance in track as I would in cross country. And even though you think you've got muck, you've got hills, you've got water, I'd be slower on track because I'm bored. I'm bored from the after 400 meters, if I'm running 5,000 meters or 10,000 on track, I'm bored.
I got you.
It just doesn't do enough for me. You mentioned earlier about running a marathon on a treadmill. Being in that one. Now I wasn't quite in one place, but you're running around a circle. You're seeing the cage from the shot put. You're seeing the long jump, pit, stuff like that. The high jump. It's boring. If other people are competing in the middle, maybe that'll help you take your mind off it a little bit, but it's just too monotonous. And I do run a lot on road now, but I tend to run places that, there's something cool to look at. There's something cool going on around you. I do a lot of out and backs, but I much prefer a loop or a circle where it's going to be different each corner you turn. And I think, because that's life, isn't it, right? Every corner you turn, no matter how... You're on a track, you run 100 meters on a straight. Apart from your energy levels depleting, the next 100 meter straight, it's the exact same. You're in a different country, there's more wind speed, less wind speed, all that kind of stuff. But generally, you can figure that out before you run the race and you know what you're dealing with. You go out to run cross country or you go out to run on a trail is like business and life that you just don't know. You turn a corner, you just don't know what's around it. Different people, for example, you could be in a city centre and yesterday you walked down a road, walked around a corner and nothing was happening. No bad stuff, no crap. There could be a serious incident around that corner today. You could have walked around that corner 100 times, but today there happened to be a shooting or there happened to be a robbery or whatever. You're dealing with a different scenario and you don't know till you get around that corner. You just can't. How can you?
I think that's a good thing, right? there's a couple books when I first started getting into ultra running. Dean Carnazzi's book, Confessions of a Midnight Runner, fantastic book. I think that he'd probably go back and make some changes to that book in terms of what your caloric intake should look like when you do long haul running. But Brain Training for Running was a book that helped me truly understand that it's not every day that you get to reach a level of pain to where you get to really discover what you're all made about. But it seems like every day if you run, you get to do that, right? Yeah. Because you're going to hit a plateau. And what I found out about running was, in the Brain Training for Running book, is what really taught me was it does have an amazing application that dovetails perfectly into life, as you're talking about. And at the end of the day, running is really just a mental game. It's not even a physical game. I mean, if anybody that's listening to this doesn't believe me and they think, hey, I can't run because I'm overweight or because I'm 150 pounds overweight or whatever, just watch the news and figure out when the next marathon is in town. And on the day of that marathon, just go sit at the finish line and be inspired. Be inspired by the people without a limb, the people that are, I've seen people that, it's amazing how much running can change someone's life, but I do think it just gives you a lot of time to fix what's upstairs. And I think that if you could, like, I never spent a single minute trying to review the courses I was going to be racing on at any capacity, because I wanted that surprise, just like life, right? Yeah. And that's anybody that's had to visit their mortality in life. In my case, hanging on, not hanging on, but I had some surgeries at MD Anderson in my life, which is a cancer center. And when you're in between surgeries, sometimes you have a lot of time to think about the things that matter. And you're like, okay, so what does this do that's going to make me stronger and healthier? And running was the thing that had the greatest impact on my ability to have a healthier and faster recovery. It wasn't because I was running great. I mean, I wasn't running great at all, actually. But it was because every day you hit this pain plateau in which you have to really make a decision that's going to allow you to define the type of person you are that day. Yeah. And for runners, if you do the statistics on CEOs, a large number of CEOs are runners because it's a punishment. That's all it is. It's just a punishment. Yeah. No one really enjoys running. They just love the results of running. Like, you don't ever feel sometimes is you always feel better when you're done running, knowing that you accomplished it than you do when you're running it. Unless you have a runner's high, which is hard to get sometimes, right? Yeah,
but I think that if you're running, if you're going out for a training run, like, I think I put up on a group that we're both on at the weekend. I went out for, I think, a 14K kind of training run on Saturday. It was easy pace, so I was running at 70% pace. So I come back in from a run like that feeling really good, feeling really happy. It's nice. Great. It's my headspace to kind of just, be free. And as a CEO, it allows you just to kind of escape. It's me. I think I said in the group, it was me and a watch. And runners, and
no phone either. I think you said
didn't bring my phone. So that's why there was no photograph that day. It was just literally me, no earphones, no nothing, just me and the noises of the world. Whatever noise is in my head, and what I really found interesting about it is when you're running like that, which is very different to running a race and trying to, maximize what you can actually deliver on that day, that you find that it gets quieter. So in that 14K, let's say by 7-8K, your mind is a much quieter place.
Oh yeah.
You're really, really starting to get into that. The endorphins are there, but it's level. Your heart rate's about 130, 135. So you're not going crazy. You're not
you settled
down
in.
The finish line. You've really settled. And to me, that's when I'm at.
Trying to find that settle.
Yeah.
It's the place where you're comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yeah. And I mean, it's funny you mentioned that. I talk about that sentence all the time, being comfort in your own discomfort. Yeah. It's really important. I think to be resilient and to be successful in life, like, who decides what successful is, right? Whatever you decide yourself, right? It's very subjective. But like, I believe to be successful in whatever you call achieving, you have to be comfortable in your own discomfort. And I actually quite enjoy it a lot of the times, Even you're talking this morning about, having to take an extra flight, taking me, 28 hours to do a 18-hour journey, because something happened on the first flight, then losing my luggage. So what? It's a first world. I texted you last night. It's a first world problem. I went and bought a new shirt. Then you gave me a shirt, so I'm 2 shirts up.
You look dead sexy in that shirt.
I like it.
I'm going to get you a tube top next time.
Yeah, it's a little.
You're a runner. You can pull it off.
It's a little bit tight, but yeah, it's cool. I like it. But it's that resilience piece. It's that piece of just feeling that, like you were mentioning, right? Let's take it from that training run to a race, right? And yeah, you know, I haven't made it to a marathon yet. I trained for one when I was about 25 years of age, but got injured about 6 weeks out. For people who know football in the UK or in Ireland, and soccer, as you guys call it, you know, I call it my Wayne Rooney injury. Wayne Rooney has played over here, is involved in US soccer now. I broke my 5th metatarsal just from pounding the ground. I was doing 80 miles a week.
That's why you shouldn't be doing road.
Yeah, it was just too much. It was too much road.
The only marathon in my life I've ever done, and I am if anybody wasn't sure of whether or not I'm an idiot, this will help solidify that for them. I volunteered. When I was first recovering from cancer, I volunteered to do every race that someone would put on my list. And I was racing coast to coast, Nations Tri in DC, LA Tri in LA, and everything in the middle. And someone's like, hey, you want to do a marathon for Lou Gehrig's disease, ALS? And I was like, I'm in. And I'm so stupid that I would just be like, I'm in without ever thinking about anything. Life is short. Yeah. You know, I'm like, look, I could be dead in 2 years from now. I'm going to race.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh yeah, by the way, it's on an indoor marathon. It's on a treadmill inside. And I was like, that was the most painful thing in my life. And I finished, but the only road running I would do from that point forward would be like the 5Ks or 10Ks and triathlons. Yeah. And occasionally, if I lost a bet, I would go run a marathon, like a rock and roll half. Mm-hmm. But that's it, because it would destroy my body. But what I learned was, and this is my advice to you, is I've never done a full marathon outside, not on a treadmill, mm-hmm. but I've done 50Ks and more on trails. And I've learned that I could go do 50K on trail and feel better when I'm finished than a half marathon on road, because I'm not pounding the ground, the flat surface as much. And when you run on a trail, you're recruiting so many more muscles to the core to stabilize the body, because of every step is an inconsistent elevation, pitch, or angle. Yeah. And you don't care about your pace. You only care about where you're sitting the next foot. So it helps me do that. So my advice to you is, man, shift from roads and go to trails and find out how much that helps your body.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Because I'm even listening to you talk, and what I like about about cross country running is that kind of every step is different, so you can't plan the next step.
All you care about is where you put that foot.
Yeah, and it's not about times. It's in cross country racing, it's literally position. It's where am I? How many are ahead of me? If you're trying to qualify for something, you're counting the numbers. I always count the numbers in your head where you are. I would never run from the front. I would always be middle of the field running and then pick off people. I like that in life as well.
Yeah.
I'll come from back here and I'll pick you off and I'll pick them off I don't think I possessed a running watch till I was about 25, 26 years of age,
So back up, because I know we're all over the place, but we know the foundation was based on competitive sports, both individual and team. And you learned how to be a team player from that. When you graduated, from whatever you graduated from, whether, I don't know what you guys call high school over there, but before you get to university probably. And when did you decide, hey man, I'm going to get into the trades or construction? And then at what point were you doing in this vertical where you realized these things are getting built and their roofs require a little bit more specialized touch?
Yeah.
How did you get into the data center industry?
I think, and I know, I'm one for tangents, so sorry, and I think you are as well. So we'll probably go off on 100 more. But I think if I go from sports to career and think, how did I end up where I am? As a kid, I worked a lot as well as playing sports. I worked, we talked earlier about, you talk about going hard in the paint in Ireland, the beverages industry is a huge industry. The service industry is a huge industry. If Revenue and Taxman is watching this or listening to this, it's a long time ago and don't hold me for it. But, from the age of 12, 13, I started working in pubs, in bars.
Really?
Collecting glasses. Look, Jordans were expensive. They were not far off as expensive then as they are right now. I mean, when I was 13 years of age, I had a pair of Jordans that probably cost me about, the equivalent of $200, 180 euro, but it was about 175 Irish pound at the time. So my parents didn't have the money for those. My teams weren't giving me, at one stage I was on a team that we did get one pair of boots, kicks a year, but, so I needed that stuff. I didn't always need 10 pairs of Jordans, but I liked them, so I started working and collecting glasses at the age of 12 years of age in a local pub 5-10 minutes walk away from where I lived. And I worked in other pubs until, well, all the way through what you call high school, secondary school for us, until the age of 18, 19, along with some other jobs. I did some work as a care assistant in a hospital. My mother was a nurse. And I worked Christmases and summers when I was 17 to 19 in working night shifts and stuff as a care assistant. But the bar game is really, weirdly, the bar game is why I believe I'm here today.
It's a very social industry.
It's a social industry. I signed up, so I finished what you call high school, and
what do you guys call it, by the way?
Secondary school.
Okay, secondary school.
So from the age of like 13 to 18, 19.
Yeah.
I finished up, didn't have a clue what I wanted to do. I had dreamt of coming over here and playing basketball. That didn't happen. I wasn't, I was working hard enough at earlier years, but I wasn't talented enough, to make it to the level I needed to make it for someone else to pay for it to happen.
Sure.
So it just didn't happen. So I ended up working, I moved to Glasgow for a year at 19 to try and figure out what I wanted to do, because I had family in Glasgow and I'd been over and back a lot to see Celtic play when I was a kid and stuff like that. So I did a year there working in a pub, moved back to Dublin, told my parents that I'd go to college because they felt, had to go to college, university, whatever you call it. Signed up, and yeah, I went for about a week. I stayed in a town. It was in Dundalk, which is about an hour and a half from where I lived at the time in Dublin. It's about an hour from Dublin Airport. And but started working in a bar in the town and started working in a college bar, or the Students' Union bar.
Sure. By then, were you bartending or something?
I was bartending from the age of 16.
Okay.
So I went behind the bar at about 15, 16. Started about 15. At night time when we finished work, I'd serve the barman their pints, and you'd be allowed a shandy, a half and half. So I started working behind the bar at 15, went from collecting glasses, and then was over there working behind the bar. Did some I wasn't quite as skinny as I am now, so I worked on the door as well, because I didn't get enough hours in Glasgow just behind the bar, so I got some hours. I was doing about 50 hours a week between working on the door.
Sure.
Quite funny though. I was a very baby-faced 19-year-old Irish guy standing there telling some very tough Glaswegians they couldn't get into the pub, but it was fun. So then I stayed about a year and I moved back to Dublin. Went to sign up for college, worked in Dundalk in the bars. And at that stage, all I wanted to do, actually, I asked when I wasn't getting to the States at 16, 17, I asked my parents, could I leave school and work behind the bar? I don't know how many people in the US would know this. A lot of people do. That in Ireland, being a barman is actually a trade. Sure. It's an apprenticeship. You do the same as you do if you're an electrician or a plumber, and you can go to, training school and they teach you the trade of being a bar, running a pub, cleaning lines, all that kind of stuff. I wanted to do that at that time when it looked like I wasn't going to have a career in basketball. My parents said I couldn't. They were probably right. I didn't do that. Then when I came back from Glasgow, was working in Dundalk, then I ended up moving back to Dublin, and got a job in Dublin Airport, in the bars in Dublin Airport. Really? So I worked for a lot of the people and listen to this podcast, especially the guys and girls who've been travelling for a long, long time through Ireland. There's a bar airside in Dublin Airport, in the old B block, B gates, called the Gate Clock Bar, and that was literally customs was downstairs from that. So I worked in that bar. It looks like an old Irish pub, and it's still there. And I worked in there for a couple of years. And I would serve everything from, people going to funerals, people going on holidays, and businessmen and women going on business trips, all sorts of people. And I loved it. It was cool. It was very transient. Very rarely you did meet the same people twice. Met people like Ronnie Wood and Shane McGowan and, music artists and sports stars and stuff. So it was cool for that. And you met some really interesting folk. The reason that bit of the story is really important is that's actually how you mentioned a minute ago, sales. That's how I got into sales. So I had a customer that used to come in a lot, and he travelled to the US and he travelled to Spain. And one day we were chatting, we were the last two people in the bar and we were just having a chat, and he said, "Man, what are you doing?" I said, What do you mean?" He said, "What are you going to do with your life?" I said, "I'm going to work." I'm working here. And yeah, but would you, I was 23 at the time. He said, do you want to have a wife and kids or, house, all that kind of stuff one day? I said, yeah, I'd love to, He said, then, you got to get yourself out of here because the hours related to this job, you're working weekends, they're probably not conducive to a growing career. Yeah, you might run and own a pub, but then your life belongs to the pub. I said, what I'll do? And he said, we'll get into sales. I said, well, okay, can you explain that to me? And he said, well, look, you're in here every day. You're managing people's expectations. I can see you. I'll watch you. You're making the most tips out of anyone here. I'm sure of it. I said, yeah, I am. So he said, you're managing people's expectations. You're managing a crowd. You're dealing with lots of different types of people at all walks of life, but ensuring that everybody is satisfied with the service they're getting. He said, that's business. That's sales. That you're managing people's expectations, your expectations of them, theirs of you. And you're responsible for a large amount of cash. You're responsible for, the environment that you're within, keeping it right. So he said, yeah, get in the sales. I said, okay. I said, sounds cool.
Said you hiring?
No, well, he wasn't. But so I said, but what do I sell? And he said, it's irrelevant. I said, it's absolutely irrelevant. He said, what you need to figure out is a pathway of somewhere you can go where there's progression. So he said, look, what you'll probably get is, because he was asking me questions like, how much do you earn? Yeah.
But he cared. He wasn't trying to be invasive. It sounds like this is someone was he Irish?
He was an Irish guy.
All right. So he cared about you.
He cared. Right. He was, and look, I got to know him. It was over about a year. I got to know him. He was in and out, and he, so he said, he figured out what I was earning. He said, look, you can clear the same as that and get a company. He asked me, did I have a car? And I said, you'll get a company car and you'll clear this much now. But he said, you should be doubling that within 3 to 5 years if you're any good at what you do. So yeah, I interviewed for numerous jobs. I looked at different options and I ended up working for a construction company.
In sales?
In sales, called ITW Construction Products. So they make Paslode and spit nailing guns that are used on so they're a US company. ITW stands for Illinois Tool Works. They have a CP Construction Products division, and I got a job with them. It was called Channel Sales, so I looked after half of the country of Ireland. So Dublin to Galway north, so a line across Dublin. Going north, I looked after half, and it was channel sales. So I dealt with builders merchants who were buying fixing tools and nails and fixings for timber frame houses.
But these are, that's a big difference, right? Because when you start in a sales model in a bar, it's business to consumer. Mm-hmm. And now it sounds like when you get into channel sales, it's business to business.
It's B2B, yeah.
And there is a completely different model in that, and I say that I have amazing people that work for me that come from very diverse backgrounds. And I had one that was in real estate, and she was a realtor, and she's fantastic. And what I learned was her background in sales was really predicated on business to consumer. And it's almost the same type of relationship that you have when you meet a friend of a friend, where if you're in the backyard at the barbecue and you meet them, the first thing that you want to do is get along with them. Mm-hmm. So you want to be liked, or you want to be nice. And that's almost very similar to what a business to consumer sales engagement looks like. Do you agree?
Yeah, I'd agree. Yeah, it's because
that's what drove your tips.
Well, yeah, absolutely.
Being liked.
Yeah, and you treat them like you would like to be treated. You don't, there's no judgment. They're here for a short period, especially in that, it's very transactional, right?
So going to sales, when you go from business to business in a channel sales program, liking each other is the last thing that matters sometimes. The first thing that matters is respecting each other, because that's the genesis on how you're going to begin negotiating, right? And sometimes it's filling each other out and drawing a line in the sand with each other and understanding what you're willing to tolerate from each other. But that is how you establish respect, because I think if you could have respect for each other, then you could later on like each other just fine and have a glass of beer. Yeah. But if you like each other, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to respect each other.
It's not enough, it's not.
So that whole transition that you were going through, I mean, that's a big transition. How was going from business to consumer successful sales to business to channel, which is business to business sales. And that's respect, trust, and loyalty. The only three things that matter in business to business matter, right? So how was that transition?
It was a big, Look, it was very different. But I think that, and I think that's where like the likes of sport came in. Quite often you played on teams where you didn't necessarily like everybody that you worked with, you played
Team sport
with.
helped.
You didn't always like your coach. You didn't always like the other guys that you were playing with or training with. But you had an end goal, which was to win. And you did everything in your power with what was available to you. So the customer who was an individual but was working for an organization, they helped you get your tips. They helped you get your wages and your bonus, because if you built a trusting rapport with them, and you're dead right, it's that honesty and integrity piece first. Yeah. So they gotta know that you have something that will make their life easier, and you gotta know how to show them that it will, and that you then have the integrity as an individual, but as a business, to be able to deliver upon that in a trusting relationship. So they cross over, but yeah, I agree. It's
a different skill set.
Because look, quite often you'll work with people in business that, you're not going to be friends with everybody you trade with, right? But if they can deliver what you require,
you can respect that.
And you can respect that. I mean, I believe you have to. It's easier if you can tolerate each other.
Yeah.
There are times you're in a meeting room with people and you bite your lip because you're thinking, on a human level, I just don't get where this guy or girl is coming from. But at the end of the day, in the commercial world, you've got to fill that spreadsheet. Unless it becomes to a point where they're abusing you, and then it becomes too much. But generally, it's just about the business piece. What I think the evolution of that then is to bring it back into that personal piece. If you've already got that, and you've got that trusting business relationship, and then you build up a strong human rapport on top of that, now I think that is just the mecca.
Yeah.
Because you both appreciate what the other delivers. You can deliver what's required in business. But then you can actually have a strong human relationship with that person. It brings the trust to another level. And it's a bit like you were saying earlier, it means then you want to help each other. You're saying, well, you know what, if there's two people I can go to that I can give this order or this contract to, and they both deliver the exact same thing, but I really like this guy, right, and I don't like this guy or girl, whatever it may be, then yeah, I'm going to go with the one that I have a trusted relationship, because when the proverbial hits the fan, because we're in data centers, we're in construction, we're in business, stuff happens, shit goes wrong. It's how we react to that. And if you have a strong human rapport with that person, it's a lot easier to pick the phone up to them on a Saturday morning and say, look, Kirk, look, Cal, we're in trouble here. I need you to roll your sleeves up for me, man, and get this sorted. Cool, no problem.
Because people that genuinely are your friends and do care about you do not want to see you not be successful. So they will own your problem just as much as it is your problem too.
100%.
And that is a pretty amazing element. That is a game changer for our industry. Do you agree? I mean, I think this industry is so niche that people that you end up working with, because they know that we're in a gold mine of an industry, right? This is a 2024 data center gold rush. It'll last for the next 3 years at a minimum. Yeah. And in that time, the rising tide's going to lift all the boats. Everyone's going to do well as long as you do right by people. Do you agree?
100%.
But we're going to continuously pick those that we know will suffer that inconvenience through the good times or bad times with us. That's why I think it's about respect, which allows you to earn trust, which allows you to command loyalty later. And those are the three things that you focus on. Liking is the last variable in business to business.
Yeah.
It's business to consumer. It has to be sometimes the first variable. Right?
Yeah, it is. I agree. Yeah.
So when you got into sales, you got into construction.
And it was just, look, it wasn't on purpose. I applied for pharmaceutical roles. I applied for FMCG roles, and I applied for that job in a company called ITW. It was very entry level, How'd
you do?
Yeah, I did quite well. They called it sales, but if I'm being honest, it was predominantly account management.
That's
right?
okay.
Yeah.
That's important too.
Yeah. So it was sales, did have targets, did have numbers, but at the time I had a product that was, top of its game. It was, very much, what you saw was what you got. Yeah. So basically I dealt with builders, merchants all around, half the country. And you were managing accounts, and you're always trying to upsell. So, they'd say, well, look, I need to order so many fixings this month. And I'd say, well, look, if you buy, 5 tools and you can sell those tools, then actually you'll get the amount you're looking for free, because you need them to get the tools. Because if they take the tools, they've more consumers. The more consumers they have, the more consumables they have to take on board. So next month they're going to have more fixings to fill those nailing guns.
Sure.
Tools. So I was quite good at that piece. And I quite enjoyed that piece. That was the bit I enjoyed more. I didn't really enjoy just going in, how many do you want today, sir, and writing it in a book. And that's probably why I lasted about 18 months, 20 months in that job.
What do you move into?
So I moved to Moy. Look, I was, and we can touch on it later, but I was at a bit of a tough spot in my life. I had piled on the weight. I wasn't training anymore for sport. My job was taking me up Monday to Friday. I'd leave Dublin on a Monday morning and get back on a Friday evening, traveling around the country.
Just being wrecked.
And
you're eating and drinking all night.
Yeah, you're 23 years of age. You're not earning a massive salary, but you're staying in a hotel 4 nights a week. You can eat what you want. You can drink what you want. You know what I mean? The way they did it was they gave you a certain amount subsistence allowance a night.
Per diem.
So I would spend the least amount on my hotel room and the rest on my food and drink.
Yeah.
Or other people's food and drink to
Right.
make friends and meet people and stuff like that. I quickly went from, 13 stone to 17 and a half stone. Wasn't really looking after myself, but was still focused on a career and wanting to do something. A buddy of mine, the guy I mentioned earlier, who's an architect or runs an architectural practice, he wasn't in data centers at the time, but he was in design. And I said, look, what do I do? What do I do next? And he said, look, get into something that's a bit more technical. Get into something where, your knowledge and your service is going to be important. And
Sure.
He said, look, in my eyes, you're in the construction industry already. The guys I see that do really well in that are people who get into specification sales. So you're dealing with an architect or an end client 3 to 5 years before they're building. You're building that trusting relationship. You're giving them a service. And then you're getting your opportunity to be specified in that project.
You're
And
trying to
then
get the spec.
you have a much higher chance of converting. And especially
Influence the
back
spec.
then, design and build culture wasn't what it is today. So there was a lot more nomination. There was a lot more traditional build. There was a lot more, I want that guy to do this element of the building. So I interviewed for 2 companies, Kone Lifts and Moy Materials. And funny, at the time, Moy wanted somebody who they could train from the ground up. So, I think the first 2 questions were, are you scared of heights? The answer was no, because you're on roofs.
Yeah.
Have you been on a roof before? And it wasn't a trick question. So first answer was, I'm not scared of heights. And the second answer was, I've been up on roofs. It was when I was in school, and we used to play soccer with a tennis ball in the mornings, because we weren't allowed to have football because it'd break the windows. I've been up on the roof to retrieve tennis balls off the roof in the school. And that was it. And obviously there was other questions around, what motivates you, how do you deal with selling? How do you deal with customers? And I talked all the way back then, without knowing it, I talked about bar work and how I manage people's expectations and how I enjoy dealing with humans. I enjoy conversing. I enjoy meeting different people. And I enjoy trying. I've always enjoyed that challenge of the unknown. If someone comes to me with a problem that hasn't been solved before, I want to figure out how to solve it. But I've also been very conscious all my life that I don't know the answer, so I'll find somebody that does. So I got the job in Moy Materials, as it was called then.
And so pause real quick on Moy. So how old's that company?
So
what all do you guys do?
Yeah, 1979, Moy Materials, the company I work for, was established. The original parent company was in the 60s. The original parent company was a constructor. They did a lot of refurbishment projects in kind of schools, hospitals, universities, etc. in Ireland, so government projects. They realised that they didn't have a supply chain in Ireland. There wasn't much of a supply chain for like windows, roofs, doors.
Sure.
So they set up a lot of their own companies, their own subsidiary companies under the Moy Group. They had a window company, they had an insulation company, and they set up Moy Materials because in the late 70s, early 80s, they were doing a lot of roofing work packages, buildings that were built in the 50s and 60s, and the roofs were failing, old asphalt and, tar roofs, and they were failing. So they were importing product in for those projects. And they said, well, why don't we there's other people. We're not winning all the projects. There's other people winning the project. So why don't we
supply for
them as well as us? Yeah. So if we don't win the project, we can win the project.
You win the supply. Yep.
The supply of the project. So they set up in 79. The company is very simply the original name Moy comes from the River Moy in County Mayo, where the guy from Dublin who set up the business originally liked to fish. His favourite place to be, his peaceful place, so he called the company Moy. Moy Materials was set up to design, supply and distribute roof systems to the construction industry. But generally at that stage it was refurbishment because there wasn't a lot being built. So it was refurb of existing buildings. We fast forward a little bit into the 90s, and this is where the link up with Moy and American companies comes from. In the early to mid 1990s, there was a massive capital influx from America, from the United States into Europe, and especially Ireland, where there was tax breaks, very low corporation tax. So you had the Xerox, IBMs, Dells, Intels, the pharmaceutical worlds,
Apple.
Yeah, Apple, all those companies setting up their European headquarters in Ireland. Or most of them. So Moy had been doing roofs, and they started to see these opportunities and got an opportunity to work with some of these clients. And our eyes were open to an American terminology called FM Global and FM Approvals. So all these buildings were factories of sorts, right? And they were ensuring or working to the building standards of Factory Mutual Global, which is obviously the world's largest independent insurer for these factories globally. So Moy invested quite a bit of money, a large sum, 6 figures at the time when they were turning over very small 7 figures. They invested about 15-20% of 1 year's turnover, not profit, but turnover, into getting our systems tested and certified to US criteria as well as local criteria, and started working with these IT and pharmaceutical life science companies. And that was the big game changer, I believe, originally for Moy in Ireland. And it was really about, that line I use every day is we sell a service that happens to come with a system. So the system's the conduit to getting paid. And that's what we're selling. It's a
roofing system.
It's a roofing system. But it's the service, it's the relationship with the designer, with the end client, and then the constructor and the subcontractor, which actually, allows us repeat business, we're involved 3 to 5 years before a project starts. I was talking in an internal meeting the day before I left Dublin, so Wednesday, and we were joking with some of the guys that are longer around the table than others, and I was saying, I'll come back to this in a minute, but moved to London in 2010, and there was a project I'd been working on from 2008 that actually got built 10, 12 years later, because we hit a recession, different things happened, but that project got built many years later. So we were 10, 12 years dealing with the design of this roof. It changed numerous times. But we act in a consultative manner, but we don't get paid as a consultant. So the 12 years of work, or 6 years of working there was free consultancy.
Yeah.
But it's not free. Well,
you're building equity in that relationship.
Absolutely, yeah. And people will keep coming back to you for it. So, yeah, to go back, I suppose, the roof systems, when we brought them in first, it was modified bitumen, mod bid as you call it here. So for people who don't think of roofing, it was the earliest version of what you saw in the Shawshank Redemption. It was, tar, black stuff, modified bitumen membranes became a thing around about that time. So it was torch application then, as opposed to, mop and flop. So it was torch applied membranes, generally on like a Stramit board or a cement or something like that. Cork boards were probably the first instance really used, but had very little installation value, but they were the first ones used. So we started to, and the American, discussions got us to this, where they were looking at, it's not just about your membrane, it's about the whole assembly. So it's your it's what your substrate is, your vapor control layer, your insulant, and your membranes. And you've got to test and certify that from internal fire, external fire, hailstorm, wind damage, etc. So that really brought us into being what we call today a system provider. So we basically take, we take an end product and test and certify that, but that is, that's a layer cake. and it's multiple commoditized components, that then become a high performance system. And we tested that in Ireland and in the US.
And when you started off there, were you still in sales?
Yeah, so I moved in there in August 2006. So, I was...
Started at the bottom?
I was 26 years of age, so I was still at the bottom. I was in a new business, but I was at the very bottom. So my first 6 months was following around, because Moy was the kind of leader in the Irish industry at that time, private entity, but they'd been around for a long, long time. So there was a lot of guys in there. When I say guys, it was guys in sales, right, at the time. We had one lady in sales, but she wasn't working on the roofing side. She was doing another product. There was a lot of other people in finance and accounts and admin in that were female, but the salespeople were guys. And plus, as I said to a bunch of kids actually the other day at a basketball training, you got to excuse me when there's girls present. I call everybody, any collective, I say, hey guys, what are we doing?
Yeah, it's slang. Yeah, we do it.
I do it all the time.
Take a number.
So I started at the bottom.
2006 and just worked your way up.
And I was basically follow guys around learning about it. I call what I was doing originally I called it roof scratching. So I had a seam probe in my hand and you're going checking laps, and I was going up on roofs when the roofers were on their cigarette break, weren't on the roof, because if they asked questions I wasn't going to know the answer to them, and they knew the answers. So it was just going up, taking photographs, taking imagery for our guys that were busier, who didn't have time to do that bit but would write the reports and help me write the reports. Because as part of what we do is we get involved in the design, we get involved in the tender process, supply the products and materials to an approved subcontractor who install the kit, but then we oversee and overwatch the installation of that system, and then we hand the materials and workmanship guarantee or warranty to the end client. So a big part of our work was making sure that it was installed as specified to meet the design criteria for the end client. Whether that end client was me or you building an extension on our house, or whether it was a hyperscale data center client in later years, or a pharmaceutical client, that was what we did. So I did that sort of role for about 6-12 months. Then I got into specification sales, and I looked after, I was one of the people looking after Ireland. But around that time, that was bringing us very close to 2008, 2009. So Big Short, death of the Celtic,
collapse of the secondary market.
Yeah, and we called it death of the Celtic Tiger because the Celtic Tiger was purring. That was what the economy was called at the time. The rise of the economy was called the Celtic Tiger. And it was the death of the Celtic Tiger. And, we saw, the big difference in the noughties from the 90s was in the 90s we had all those American clients, we still had them, but then they started building mixed use developments everywhere. So we started doing a lot of podium deck waterproofing, rooftop balconies, terraces on apartment block building. They were building, we joked quite a bit, they were building apartments for the people that were building apartments. So there was people coming in from Eastern Europe to help us build because we didn't have enough people to build. And I remember asking someone one day, who's going to live in these blocks? All the European guys that are building them. I was like, is that, and even at 25, 26 years old, is that really sustainable? We're building, what happens when we stop building? We'll never stop building. Things are great. Look at it. Okay. What goes up must come down, unfortunately. But, Celtic Tiger died. I was with the company a couple of years at that stage. 3 years. And my old managing director / CEO, Pat Farrell, who has just retired at Christmas time, and he's my mentor and is one of my best friends in life. He approached me around Christmas 2009, just before it, and said, look, we're going to have to do something. Our turnover's diminished, and we've lost about 65% of our turnover. There's cranes waving in the wind. Who knows when the Irish construction industry is going to pick back up again, and we need to grow. We didn't want to lose people. We had about 19, 20 employees at the time. We lost a couple. We lost a receptionist. We lost a warehouse operative, and we lost a lady that sold some products that weren't in roofing and were in internal of apartments. And they weren't building apartments anymore. So he asked me would I be willing to move to the UK. And I said, yeah, well, if I got to keep my job, because we were all, everyone was taking pay cuts and stuff like that. And I was like, if I got to keep my job, I'd love to. I wasn't I wasn't married. I had no kids. I had no mortgage. so I had no ties.
Your flexibility.
I had a girlfriend who's now my wife, but I was going out with Paula about 6 months at that stage. So I met her in the August, and then he asked me to go, and I went in January. So August 2009, I met Paula, and then in January 2010, we agreed to do it. And for 3 months, I moved to London. I went over for 3 nights a week in a hotel same hotel in central London for 3 months, and basically went around every GC, architect, end client I could talk to in the general construction market. Now I'm talking schools, universities, that sort of stuff, to see if there was room for another player in the specification and provision of flat roofing systems. Believed quite quickly there was room, even though they were in recession as well. They always say recession is the best time to set up a business. It was the only time because we had to. And St. Patrick's Day, the 17th of March 2010, I moved to London. Still in my late 20s. Told my new girlfriend, look, I'm going to be going to London, but it's an hour away, so we'll see each other weekends, we'll figure it out. And moved over to London to a place called Balham in southwest London, which is Zone 3. So, 30 minutes from Gatwick Airport, 20 minutes from Victoria Station on a train. And moved over there to set up the business. And I suppose that was
There was more data centers being built there at the time.
At the time, being honest, data centers didn't really come into it, right, for us at that time in the UK. And I'll get to that now when I talk about us and data centers. But there was some, but a lot of them were private enterprise data centers, which were been designed and built in a different way than the input we had with the architects designing for hyperscale operators and co-location companies. So it was very different. And there wasn't the same emphasis with the clients that were building in the UK at the time on that kind of understanding of the American design criteria as well as the European norms, because they were, it was in Britain. So we're building them in a British way. And that's just it. And, I remember when I went to one of my first meetings, not about a data center, but one of my first meetings with a client. So I got specified on a school project, and the GC walked me in the room, one of the biggest GCs in the UK at the time. He said, right, okay, so you spec this up, you're on the school. Okay, tell me a bit about you. What experience do you have in schools? Oh, well, look, we've been doing schools since 1979, and what schools? And being Irish, I'm like, right, St. Thomas, St. Patrick, St. Francis, St. this, St. that, right? And okay. How many of them are in London? Oh, none. How many of them are in the UK? Yeah, none. But look, it's roofs, it's schools. I've done the compliance work.
The application's the same.
It wasn't in his eyes. No way. You're not doing this. You've no experience here in the UK. You've no experience doing this. So no, it's not going to work. So I found out very quickly that we were going to struggle, in some of that type of stuff. We could put that 2-3 years into specification, but if the GC and the client, the GC who was the client in that instance, right?
They would
design and build culture. If he wouldn't buy in, it was pointless. So we had one side of it where we were working really hard just on the subcontractor and working our relationships with them to help us work with the main contractors, GCs. In the UK and Europe, we'll call them a main contractor here, in the US language, and in data centers, we call it GC. So worked a lot on that piece. And built up our name, and an awful lot of our work then became what I called specification break. So it was someone else had done all the design work, but we're trying to sell the value of what we can bring to the construction management team on a live project, and then ideally turn that spec break opportunity into spec make. So you work with an architect and you say to them, look, we've worked with you, we've broken spec. How about next time, to save you all that work of breaking spec, just write me in next time, and you build up your repertoire, you build up your opportunity. To bring that back to go forward into the data center market, I mentioned Moy had been working with, US clients since the mid 1990s, and in the early 2000s, first 2 hyperscale data center clients came to town. And they were working very much in the Dublin region. And Moy got an opportunity on phase 3 of one of those. So in 2004, on phase 3 of one of those projects, to work with the client, because we'd worked with an architectural practice who was working with them. We'd just finished a project with them. The product they were originally going to supply didn't become available because of a problem the client had with the product. I'm not saying there was a problem with the product, but it opened a door for us. And we were asked, look, can you do this data center project? Do you have FM global approvals? And can you supply material to site in about 2 to 3 weeks? Yes, 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 and yes.
You just need that opportunity.
Yeah. And then we continued so we worked with that client continuously and many more in Ireland. So at the time when I moved to London first, I was trying to look for those type of opportunities, or even to talk about US clients in that manner, hoping that would be our niche, as you call it, and we talk about it being the same. It wasn't really there until 2013, when a UK builder had been awarded a project in the Netherlands for a client that we had already worked with in Dublin, with an architect we had already worked with in Dublin. And we were asked to do the design and specification for the roof package. So that opened up a whole new door. And the bit that's important to go back and say, I suppose, is that originally in 1990s and early 90s, when we were working on pharmaceutical and then data center called critical infrastructure projects, we probably didn't. We knew we were looking after the client. We knew we had to think about what they were doing, but we didn't think about it as a different sector. You know what I mean? It was another
industrial, commercial project.
It was. Why we were continuously used, in my opinion, was because we zero water ingress was critical to us, which is obviously critical to a critical infrastructure client and a mission critical client. So that kind of carried over, kept us on that project for a number of years, and then was the catalyst to us getting involved in that project in Europe. So what I found quite quickly was I've been working really, really hard for 3 years to build up to get a certain level of turnover in the UK. I had 3 or 4 staff at that stage. And I got that same level of turnover matched in one project in 1 year in a different country, because we were valued, because that client and that chain of construction management team said, we want this company in there because we value what they
predictable product
and the service. So very quickly I said, right, okay, I was talking to people and looking at that, critical infrastructure and mission critical. And I was like, right, where else are they building these? What are they doing? And so that's when I decided to really try and learn more about the sector and the industry that is data centers. And as I'm involved, as I think with Host in Ireland and Gary Conley, who talks an awful lot, and US and European networks, and he'll talk about the where data, when data, why data, who data, etc. So I really wanted to immerse myself and understand, what are these buildings? What are they doing? So this is 2013, 14. What are they doing in there? Why is our roof important? How can we be of assistance further than just supplying a roof? So I'll often talk about, my aim is for us to be anything from paracetamol to penicillin for a client when it comes to the design of their building envelope and the pain that it could possibly cause. It might be just something tiny. You mentioned putting a solar panel on a roof. That's paracetamol, right? How do we get around that? That's easy. It could be, if a 20-year-old roof or a 10-year-old roof and someone's just cut a massive hole in it, put in a new AHU, and now I've just shut down a colo for a month and I'm losing millions. Sure. So that's more on the penicillin, or maybe they need something stronger just to take away the feeling of the pain, because the pain isn't going to go away just yet. So I submersed myself in that. And then the other bit that you were talking about earlier is, offer the service to those clients. Then the GC was working on another project. Architectural practice was moving somewhere else. Another architectural practice moved into phase 2. Then before I knew it, we were working on a project in Denmark, and then we're in Sweden, and then we're in Germany, and then we're in Belgium. And
then you're moving.
Before you know it, you're in 10 countries, individual projects, but each project, has great opportunity for value but repeat opportunity for service-led business. And that's really where I suppose my data center career started, as I call that part of it, because what I said internally in the company is, look, yeah, we are roofing specialists, but I want to be seen as data center specialists. I want these people to look at us and say, these guys get what we're building, why we're building, and the magnitude of the problem if there's waterproof.
So you knew early that the data, because there was a data center gold rush of Ireland, which is what shut down Ireland's power, right? Was it Air Grid? Mm-hmm. And Air Grid just a few years ago was like, we're putting a moratorium here, because everybody went there to build data centers. And you must have just been seeing that explosive growth of the industry from the front row of Ireland, right?
Yeah, I mean, you already had the flap market, Frankfurt, London, Amsterdam, Paris, and then -D for Dublin. And Dublin became that next market, and everybody wanted to come there. It was tax efficient. We were getting stuff built quick and built well. We tend not to turn away business. When people come to our country and want to do business, whatever they want to do, we'll, providing it's legal and we can do it, we will do it. We will get it done. So we saw that, and we started working with multiple clients there as well. You saw a lot more co-location clients coming to town. But then we talked earlier about the data center ecosystem. The Irish data center ecosystem just grew so much. So when for example, that first job I was doing in the Netherlands in 2014, when you went to a pub, 10 minutes away from the site in the local town in the evening time, it was full of Irish people and English people who were designing and building this data center. There wasn't many Dutch people. There's a handful, and there's a lot more now, Dutch people and German people who are involved in data centers, huge amount, and doing a phenomenal job. But at that time, a lot of the projects, because why? Well, why were we able to do a job in the Netherlands? American client, we had built with them before. They saw Netherlands as another state in Europe, and we designed and built for the English language to US criteria and European criteria. Check. We could do all that. Whereas if I went to the Netherlands to build a hospital, at that time, I wouldn't have been able to do it because we didn't speak the language. We didn't understand the local design in the same manner.
What was the biggest social difference you saw in between verticals of industry, and outside the technology and the specifications, but there is a different culture in the data center industry altogether. Do you agree?
Speed and scale.
Okay. So as you're learning this industry and you're trying to position yourselves to be perceived as the preeminent leader in roofs in mission critical in Europe, what were you doing to advance yourself? I mean, I know there's data center dynamics shows, and you were talking about you went to Monaco, and there's a very strong set of shows that go on in Europe. Is that where you started going to network and learn more about the industry?
So I mean, first and foremost, I use my own network. So I would, the first thing I did was I understood from the first project I was on, actually, I was on the roof one day, and the guys were installing and I was doing my checks. So I went over to the Netherlands every week for 2 days and had a look at what they were doing and, did the inspections. So I was the spec guy, but I was the tech guy as well. And and I was on the roof one day, and somebody started coming over to a corner where they were roofing and started waving his arms going, stop, we got to stop. So we're working, cranes are coming up now, so you got to stop. And they're like, when? So the captain for the roofing, the top guy, the contracts manager for the roofing company said, well, how long do you want us to stop for? And he said, till they tell us we can start again. I was like, right, okay. So who's that? So I went down, I talked to the project director and I said, who's deciding this? And he said, MEP. He said, they're shifting up chillers, they're bringing them up on the roof, they're bringing up MEP equipment, and, we gotta, that's the bit that matters here. So you got to work around it and your team. And look, I wasn't managing the team. I was just overseeing what I was having a look at their install. But straight away, I'm a white child. So I was like, right, why? Why are they in charge? What do they do? I understood what
critical question attitude
meant, right? Yeah. So I was like, well, why is that guy in charge? Why does, so I was schooled on, the importance of, obviously, this project is, a lot of it is led by the elect side of it. So I wanted to learn more about that. How do our roofs interact with that? And I knew there was equipment on our roof. But what happens to the equipment then? How many years' time are they going to change that equipment? I was in a meeting for the same project, and I was looking at things, and I always measure the scale of a building in square meters, and they were talking about megawatts. So I was like, right, how do I understand how many megawatts per square meter? How do I speak their language? And so actually, one of the things I did first before moving on to many other opportunities was I immersed myself with people I could get to know in the MEP world. And now I know a lot of them are GCs as well, right? We see it now, an awful lot of the GCing is done by mech-elect companies or companies with mech-elect backgrounds. But so I got to know the biggest players in Europe in mech-elect, and of which most of them happened to be Irish. So I spent time with those guys, looked at how they did their business development, how they looked at their planning, learned about what happens to the data center after we put a roof on it and it all starts working, and and if the roof didn't work, for some example, what happened. So they brought me to some live data centers that were active and actually working. I'd been on the roofs of these but never inside these, and I just really wanted to immerse myself in that piece of, if something goes wrong, what does that look like on the inside, and how can we then continue to design and evolve our systems? Because look, construction is construction, right? As in, change doesn't happen all that quickly, only in the last decade, and it's happened over the years, but in the last decade, especially in the data center market, have we seen a big shift from concrete to steel, and speed and scale was the reason. They just couldn't wait for the concrete to cure anymore. Yep. You talk to a lot of the older generation, they'd still say, give me back the concrete. I prefer it. I know it. I love it. But we just can't build as quick. It's
not as fast.
And there's times we can do a hybrid of the two, and we do lots of that, and in the US, you do a huge amount of that hybrid piece of using concrete and steel together. Yeah.
Right, so you can't do certain things.
And especially in Europe, we're building in Scandinavia in the wintertime, it's minus 11 degrees Celsius,
can't wait for concrete to set up in that.
No. Yeah. So it was just about immersing ourselves and myself in understanding that and getting to know the other people in the critical path. So I'm not selling my product to the MEP company, but if they have that much say and they're going to the client saying, guys, we interact with roofs every day, and we've interacted with good roofs and shit roofs, and you should really talk to these guys because they seem to know what they're talking about. That became that having an advocate in those guys and building up that understanding was huge. And then the other piece was just learning about the whole ecosystem. Yeah, using DCD. I mean, DCD was the first. It wasn't the first event I went to. I went to a DCW in London, but it was the first event that I went to that I said, yeah, I think I'll throw some money to sponsor at this event. And I liked it because you had to pay to entry, so you didn't have lots of tire kicking. I liked it because their content seemed fairly strong.
Sure.
And the level of people they were getting there were decision makers. A lot of them. So, I started working with George Rocket and his team back, 8 years ago. But the other thing that I started doing around then, and it goes back to the very first thing we talked about in this pod, was that connection piece between Ireland and the US. About 8 to 10 years ago, I started coming to the US to talk to clients. I know they don't decide at the end of the day if Moy Materials get specified on a roof on their own. They can't point at the local architect and say, you have to do this. And sometimes they might, but in Colo world they might. But I wanted to understand what they were doing, why they were doing it, and that they understood what we were doing. So for example, we had some of our biggest battles early on projects where a plan of record or basis of design would come over from the US. It would be written to suit US products, but that weren't available on the European market, or maybe they weren't European compliant, but they were US compliant. So we had to, with the design team, Europeanize that specification. So my aim was to Europeanize the specification before it
really
left.
Smart. Yeah, you were trying to get ahead of it, so you could understand how to interpret and read the tea leaves, basically, on how to translate it into what would be acceptable as industry indicative best practice in another market that's emerging.
And in the climate as well. Like, building a data center in Texas or in, Virginia or in Arizona is very different to Sweden, Denmark, Dublin. And even in all those places, it's very different.
Sure.
You've got the climate, the actual climate, but then you got the
culture,
the social climate, the political climate. It's all very different. So we had to get ahead each time and understand that local environment we were working in while still meeting the needs of the US client. And that was what I wanted to do. I'm not saying nobody else does it. I'm not saying nobody else tries to. There'll be people that might hear this and go, if it's new to them, then they're probably not even going to bother doing it because they'll think he's full of crap and whatever. But it was done very, I didn't sit down in 2013 and say, I'm going to do this. It was done organically, step by step by step by step. But the aim was to immerse myself in it, understand it, and then continuously try and learn to be able to deliver something of value to that market. Because then they would feel that they can utilize us. We won't win every project. We won't be on every job, but I wanted to be the go-to for data center roof systems.